Here we go. So today's topic is home office tips, brought to you by Holistic Services Group. So there's a number of different sessions that we're going to be bringing to you guys relating to various sort of areas, etc. So just to mention again, my name's Heath. I'm an osteopath and WHS consultant. So I'm looking today to try and help yourself and your team members optimize their home office setup. So obviously we've got a large proportion of the Australian workforce currently working from home. So we need to understand there's going to be many challenges, and some of those challenges relate to the fact that some of us just haven't simply worked from home before. That's not been in our job remit before. But two, we've also got individuals who perhaps aren't necessarily capable or able to perform the vast majority of their work tasks at home, and therefore they might only be able to perform some of them. So we'll talk a little bit around how we might problem solve some of this stuff. So another key consideration that we need to be mindful of is that perhaps the home office environment may not well be set up as optimal as our office environment. So again, you'll probably find that yourselves and many others are probably working from different working environments that might look like the dining room table for some people, all the way through to that sort of formal home office study environment that perhaps mirrors like your typical office environment, okay? When it comes to equipment, we might also be limited in our choice of equipment and availabilities of equipment. So we need to sort of be thinking as individuals and then as a business, how do we optimize what we've got in that environment to sort of better manage worker comfort, productivity, but whilst also looking to reduce the risk of developing aches and pains. Work hours may also be quite vastly different too for many of us. So there'll be some of our teams and workers who are at home with kids at the moment. So their partners may be at home with work also. So we're needing to therefore be perhaps somewhat flexible about how we perform our work throughout the workday. Might not be appropriate or actually even practical that we can do our work between, say, 9 and 5, and we have to look at staggering our work throughout the day. And so therefore having that flexibility around that perhaps takes some of that stress off the individual, so that therefore they can better manage their work and life requirements, but also potentially say family commitments and that sort of stuff. When it comes to working from home also, so the home environment is now our work environment. So we need to consider some of the broader health and safety issues there, and what we can do there to try and optimize the setup to ensure that the home is a safe place to work. Then we think about your workstation, whatever that might look like in the home, and potentially some of those sort of either habits or the environment and the setup and how they might impact on how we're sitting and performing our tasks, and whether or not perhaps the environment's contributing to why we're in awkward postures, or is it simply just the fact that some of us are falling into bad habits and slumping and slouching and not taking enough regular breaks, etc. That might be why we're getting some aches and pains. So just to reiterate here, some of the key sort of aches and pains that many of us sort of may be experiencing are very similar to the office environment and in many other work environments. The neck, the shoulders and the upper limb are going to be some of those key areas that the body is probably going to end up resulting in developing tension if we're performing work for long periods of time, not taking regular breaks, and if we're getting ourselves into awkward postures. Same thing goes with our wrists and hands, and that will depend somewhat on the types of tasks we're doing. And in particular, we need to be thinking about at home too, our eyes, and giving our eyes the appropriate sort of rest breaks. So they often say every 20 minutes, look 20 meters away for 20 seconds. They also say every 30 minutes, look away for 30 meters for 30 seconds, just to give ourselves a bit of a break there. So we're not just staring at that fixed position of the screen the whole time. Low back's another common one that can often develop throughout the duration of the day if we're not sort of getting up and moving around a lot. And I'm hoping that many of you guys already are sort of getting up and taking regular breaks outside where possible. And that might be within the confines of your own house and home, but it also might mean going for sort of walks around the block once, twice, or 3 times in the day, just to get yourself moving. So what equipment do we have available? So this is going to be very context specific to each individual and their workplace and what they already had at home, and then what work equipment they can take home. So most of us are going to have in some form a laptop or a computer available to us from work or at home. When it comes to the ergonomic task chair, If we're lucky enough that we had a task chair at home, great, then we can look to sort of use that across multiple work areas to optimize ourselves. But if we don't, what's the next best option? And for many of us, that's probably going to be the dining room chair, and we need to think about how we sort of make that more comfortable. One thing I'd be sort of thinking about too is obviously depending on how long we're going to be working from home. So at this stage, we know that it's very likely we're probably going to be working home for another 4 to 6 weeks or so. Therefore, is there a capability of getting the work chair from the workplace back home, just given that we're going to be spending a big chunk of our time here performing work tasks? We need to be thinking about the desk. So do we have a formal work desk, or is the dining room table or some other type of desk going to be our option to be working from? So we need to think about alternative work areas and types of tasks that we perform also. So if we're performing, say, phone-based tasks or perhaps webinars like this, are we able to actually set that laptop up on a kitchen table bench or perhaps on the ironing board table so that we can stand and partake in some of those webinars? Or if we're on the phone and we've plugged in our headset on our mobile phone, can we get up and go for a bit of a walk, therefore breaking up that sitting posture? What accessories do we have at home? If we've got a keyboard, mouse, external monitor, etc., they're probably the key sort of ones that if we've got those, we want to be using those. So what we don't want to have is people having their personal external monitor, keyboard, mouse sitting there, but them choosing to use their laptop instead. We want to be docking that laptop into the screen, using the external keyboard and mouse, docking it into your laptop so that we can separate ourselves from that and optimize our setup. So I've just got 4 nice little images here that I put together for you. So if you can see here up on the top left box, we've got image 1. So this is your typical dining room table with your dining room chair and laptop. So if we're going to be working in this type of situation, we're probably wanting to maximize sitting in this position for 30 minutes before we take a good 5 to 10 minute break. And if we're going to be working in this position for many hours over the day, we need to be then thinking about how do we change that. So I've put in here picture number 2. You can see here I've placed a cushion underneath my hips, soften the seat pan, but I've also got myself a rolled up towel, and you can also look to get yourself a small cushion, place that in the small of the back. What we're doing in this scenario is optimizing our sitting posture. So the individual should be more comfortable, but we're still going to have the same issues attached to our upper limb and neck because we're working with the laptop. Number 3, we're now looking at how we look to optimize some of our neck positions when we're looking at the laptop. So by docking in the keyboard and mouse into the laptop, we're able to push that screen back further away, which will soften the degree of neck flexion required to view the screen. So if you can, this is what I'd be sort of generally highly encouraging many people to do. And then even better again, and this shouldn't be a limitation for most, in image 4 here, how do we prop our laptop up higher so that we're again bringing that screen height up more towards our eye line when our head's in a neutral position. So many of us might not have a laptop riser, but what we can do is get some books or boxes, etc., and prop that up. And what we're then looking to do is try to replicate what would typically happen at your workstation. So this is your dining room table with chair, using cushions to support yourself, and then bringing in an external keyboard and mouse, plugging it into your laptop and raising your laptop. So this is probably best case scenario for a person that doesn't have an ergonomic chair or a formal workstation at home. I've now sort of got our sort of typical office environment. So let's look at image on the right here. So the sitting workstation firstly, because a large number of us probably won't have access to a standing workstation. So this is where we bring in our ergonomic task chair. And I'll just quickly talk through some of the key principles of setting ourselves up in the chair. So when we're sitting on an ergonomic task chair, one, we want to check that the weight capacity of that chair can handle our weight. We want to check that the fit is appropriate for us. So if you look at the seat pan depth here, there should be a good 2 to 4 fingers gap between the front of the seat and behind the calf, which therefore then means that that seat pan's appropriate. So you can see here on that image there, I've probably got a good 4 or 5 or 6 fingers gap there, so it's appropriate. The backrest height itself, it wants to go up to that sort of mid sort of shoulder height area. So just through here, that means we're going to have the vast majority of the spine being supported when we're sitting back into the chair. Now, when we're sitting, We want to have the seat pan relatively flat, the backrest not locked up at 90 degrees, but more at sort of like 100, 110 degrees so that we can then gently rest back into the chair. And then we want to then adjust the seat height to a position where our forearms are just above desk height here. So that will ensure that we're sitting comfortably, forearms at an appropriate height when we're typing and using the mouse, so we're not going to be in any awkward shrugging position. And then we want to check do our feet touch the ground. So if our feet are not touching the ground after making those changes, that's when a footrest might be appropriate. Short-term solution might well be placing your feet on the wheel casters. However, I'd be encouraging a footrest if we're going to be at home for the next sort of 4, 6, 8 minutes or so. Now, looking at the keyboard and mouse next. So we want to encourage our workers to get up close to the desk, keep the keyboard relatively close so we're not reaching too far away from us, and then having the mouse adjacent to it. So that way, the keyboard and mouse position is not encouraging us to lean forward or reach through our upper limbs, which will then drive a different sitting posture. The screen height. Now, this image is not ideal, but if you look straight ahead now, and if in this image here I was looking straight ahead, the screen should be just up beyond arm's length away when I've got my hands fully outstretched, and my eye line should be falling on the top third of the screen. So they're the key principles. Set your chair up, set the seat pan, backrest angle, and then chair height. Then get your keyboard and mouse in that preferred position when we're not overreaching. Place your hand out in front. Your hand should almost touch the screen. Your eye line should fall on the top third of the screen. Now, for those that are lucky, if we go to a standing workstation setup, the desk should come up to a position that now mirrors the same height relative to the forearms when we're typing. So bring the desk up to a height where the forearms are just above desk level. Double check that the keyboard and mouse are not far away, so they're in nice and close. The screen's arm's length away or just beyond, and your eye line falls on the top third of the screen. Now, if we are lucky enough to have a desk set up like this on the right, we want to be taking breaks every 45 to 60 minutes. And that's taking a sort of short 5-minute break. We're doing lots of high repetitive typing and mouse tasks. We want to be taking a short 30-second break every 5 to 7 minutes and making sure we take our hand away from the mouse and keyboard to give it a rest, and then taking a longer 15-minute break every couple of hours, and then preferably a longer break middle of the workday, whenever that might be for the individual. Sitting and standing at work, we want to be, again, alternating postures regularly. So if we're used to sitting and standing in the office and now we've got a sit-stand desk at home, look at switching up between sitting and standing every 30 minutes or when you catch yourself slumping. If you're not used to standing much at home and you've got a sit-stand desk, build up gradually your tolerance to this. So you might start with 15 minutes every hour. So a few key tips there. So if you don't have an ergonomic chair, use cushions to sit on and against your back to support the low back, or use towels if possible. Get your hands on an external keyboard and mouse where possible and plug this into your laptop if you don't have a full-size monitor. Push your laptop away from you and raise the screen up if possible. And when not performing keyboard and mouse tasks, make sure that you get up and try and perform other tasks standing, and change the work environment up also, because we're now in our house all the time. So with that will come a bit of cabin fever. So we want to be getting outside if possible. And that might mean, sometimes compromising your working posture for a little bit, just to get the laptop outside onto perhaps your outdoor sitting area, just to change up so we get some fresh air and some sunlight there. So everything in moderation. Again, just to reiterate those key micro breaks, take 30 seconds every 5 to 7 minutes if you're performing lots of typing and mouse use. Try and have 2 to 3 standing or movement breaks every couple of hours, and then a longer break if we can every 90 to 120 minutes. Can we stagger our workday so we don't perform 8 hours in a block, but can we do 2 hours break, 2 hours break, etc.? Regular eye breaks, 20 minutes, look 20 meters away for 20 seconds. If using a sit-stand desk, start with small incremental amounts of standing if we're not used to it, and build that tolerance up. and then otherwise try some gentle stretching and movement and exercise and get outside and walk. Thank you. I'm going to stop that share now for here, and then I'll open up to any questions that we might have. So would anyone have any questions at all that are maybe specific to their particular workplace or their particular themselves that I might be able to answer for you? And if so, feel free to sort of type down in the chat box there. Otherwise, I'm happy to unmute and have anyone sort of ask questions and stuff. Hi, everyone. So does anyone have any particular questions at all?
Is your presentation available for us?
Yes, it should be. So obviously I will need to double check with Michael at Holistic Services, but I'm assuming it's going to be recorded and given to you to be able to sort of use for yourself and share around. But that's my understanding.
Okay.
If you're going to be using this within your, say, within your work team members and sharing that within the workplace, just obviously every business has their own policies and procedures around how to manage and what they're sort of doing. But just encourage those, if they're at that dining room table, to be taking regular breaks. There's an onus on them to be mindful of that, because I suppose I also work in private practice and see patients with musculoskeletal disorders, and from experience already, I've got workers coming into the clinic over the last 2 weeks, reporting neck pain, shoulder pain, back pain, and some of that's based around them perhaps not being proactive enough themselves in taking regular breaks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions at all?
Okay.
Okay, no worries. If you do have any questions, feel free to touch base with Holistic Services, and any particular questions can be then directed towards myself, and I can respond through them and give you sort of some guidance around best practice office ergonomics at home, given the scenario in. Obviously, at the moment, we don't know how long we're working from home for, so if it turns out to be something that's going to be a longer period of time, I'd be very mindful of trying to optimise their setup. And then if you've got workers or yourselves that have got pre-existing or current musculoskeletal complaints, make sure you get onto that sooner rather than later. And that might mean some form of an assessment, or it might mean just sort of changing up of equipment or environments, just to sort of stop that from becoming problematic. I'd like to say thanks everyone for attending, and hopefully you can tune into next week's sort of session that we're going to be